everybody, and welcome to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. I am naturopath Fiona Chin, co-creator of the Kidney Coach and Genesis, a range of supplements formulated by naturopaths with over 30 years experience to support those diagnosed with chronic kidney disease to lower creatinine levels and improve eGFR levels. And I'm joined again today by one of my favorite guests to have a nice, big, soul deep connecting conversation with, the beautiful Stephanie Modavis. If you haven't met the beautiful Stephanie before, she's a health coach. She's a yoga instructor. She's doing a lot of work with the Venus and Mars work. And apart from that, what makes her an actual professional in the field, she's gone through her own health journey when it comes to kidneys. She's gone through 2 kidney transplants, dialysis, you name it, she's done it. She's mastered the navigation. If one can ever master this navigation step of the medical health field and how they support, maybe it's the wrong word, people through dialysis and transplant, and has then realized the massive gap that maybe Western medical model has, and has been very inspired to go back and try and fill that gap and support people going through this process. So Stephanie brings an invaluable wealth of knowledge from her skill set, but also nothing makes you more of a professional when you've gone through something yourself, and Stephanie has gone through it twice. So I'm always honored and delighted and awe-inspired when Stephanie joins us, because you really can't beat lived experience, which is something not everybody has. So Stephanie, welcome back to the channel.
Hello. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for that awesome introduction. Hearing you talk about that really reminds me of, wow, I've had a really crazy health journey. But for anybody who's new on the journey, no matter which way your journey goes, hopefully it's towards the healing direction where maybe a transplant is not needed. But if you do end up going down that path, all of the work at Kidney Coach is still very helpful during and after. And you can get through this journey even if what is perceived to be the worst situation does happen. So thank you for letting me be here to offer some hope and some holistic experience and intelligence to try to help others who are going through this journey. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. So we've got a really great conversation. It was interesting. We were just talking before we hit record. Stephanie and I did. It's probably one of my favorite conversations that I've had on the YouTube channel. Last time it was called Being the 4-Minute Mile, and looking at kidney disease. And Stephanie and I really dug into changing the narrative around kidney disease being healing, and that everything seems impossible until it becomes possible. And so the whole channel at Kidney Coach and everyone that I talk about, we are all trying to change the narrative around kidney disease being a treatable condition, and that you are not handed over a death sentence when you have end-stage kidney disease. And so Stephanie and I had a really great conversation about that last time that many of you received very positively. So when we were discussing what to talk about next, the next sort of topic that really made sense and really called to Stephanie to talk about was about who you take along on that journey with you. And it's funny for anyone that's on my Instagram page, I often post stories about be careful who you surround yourself with, because the studies show you become who you spend the most time with. The 5 people that you spend the most time with is generally who you become. You take on their habits, their thinking. So if you hang around negative people, you become more like them. So this conversation to me seems really important, especially if you're healing, about who you choose to be in your soul tribe. And so Stephanie is going to lead the conversation with that today, and with her beautiful PowerPoints that she puts together, which I'm always so grateful for. I love PowerPoints. So Stephanie, I'm going to hand the conversation over to you, but I think this is a really valuable one that I think people don't think about on the healing journey, of just how important it is about who you surround yourself with and how that will impact your journey and your healing.
Absolutely. And I want to just, based off of what you just said around, you become partially who you surround yourself, the 5 most people that you surround yourself, that in some way, inevitably, you're going to pick up on certain traits. And you know, if you have become enlightened and you happen to be in a 100% positive state of mind all the time, maybe you can bypass some of those negative people that are in your circle. But I don't know about you, but I'm fully human and I'm not fully enlightened most of the time. So that means that I'm susceptible contingent on how much sleep I get, how I'm feeling that day, what's going on in my life. I'm susceptible to being in a frequency where I can just pick up things through the subconscious. So you're absolutely right. It's really critical to start to be aware of the people that you surround yourself, and especially when you're going through something as serious as a disease and you want to work towards a healing process. Yeah, so here we go. When we are on a healing journey, it is helpful to understand how our relationships affect, help, hurt, and teach us. Relationships are our best opportunities to grow or stay stuck with others and with ourselves. So I thought this was just a really important introduction because, again, in life, there's a tendency for us to just, well, this is my family and these are the friends I've always had, and this is just who I'm with, without really understanding that at some point, we can start to make conscious choices about our environment, depending on what we can tolerate in relationship and whether or not, we're healthy or not is a really big one. So I thought I would just go ahead. We're going to have some fun today and just talk about some different types of relationships. Okay. So obviously, and a really important one to me, at least, especially going on a 25-year journey of facing my own mortality and dialysis and kidney transplant, is my personal connection with, the God of your own understanding, or a spiritual connection. So that's something that's broader, it's bigger, it's often invisible. It requires your imagination and perception to be outside of the box and not so myopic, like in the moment, who's right in front of me. But for me, absolutely. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper into all of these. So I give you a little example, but that's a type of relationship, your spiritual connection. Some people maybe don't, depending on what their beliefs are, maybe they don't feel like they have very much of a spiritual connection. But if you don't believe in anything, even I found that the staunchest of atheists have these relationships with their morality and like their ethics. And they have these relationships that maybe we could deem as broader perspective relationships, or even spiritual, so to speak. Then we have another type of relationship, which I would call it with our higher self. So these first couple are a little bit higher and they're a little more maybe complicated to develop, but they exist. So the higher self would be, you've got your normal everyday self. And when we start to develop or open up to a relationship with our higher self, it's when we start to notice that we have our experience living in our own life, living in our movie, but then somehow we can kind of pull up and look down and maybe look at our life as a movie and kind of see that there's some other witness or director kind of on board there. So that's a very beneficial relationship when we cultivate a relationship with our higher nature and our higher self. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then we get into some of the ones maybe people are more familiar with. So we're going to talk about soulmates, intimate relationships. We're going to talk about what is really the soul tribe. Like how does that play out? How does that actually look? We're just going to talk about friends and family relationships. And then we're going to talk about the beautiful yet dreaded karmic relationships. So, all right. Start with the big one first. So a little bit more into the spiritual connection. I perceive the spiritual connection as the highest. And I don't mean, I mean highest as just the most out there. We have to get in touch with all of these other sides of us that are outside of just what we see. So for me, this is so important because it helps me to perceive reality in this higher, broader perspective where we connect with elements that are really necessary when you're going through challenging situations, which are the feminine perspective type of spiritual words of faith and trust and flow, and understanding that this process we're going through, even though we might not like it or it's not ideal, that our story is part of this tapestry of something broader. right? So
Yeah.
we learn to mature in this relationship. We learn to participate in this relationship with our life, and we start to allow things rather than resist them. So that's why this type of relationship is really important for me personally, because I don't know about you, but I was born a control freak, because for some reason I felt like I could control my life, I would somehow be safer.
Yeah, very. I'm so glad you mentioned that. It's very common. I too have the control freak tendencies, and yes, it's exactly that, isn't it? It's the thinking that we're sitting on this planet, spinning through the universe as this tiny blip, and we somehow fall under the illusion that we have some control over this great big thing happening around us, and it is quite the awakening, and it's quite a spiritual awakening when you realize, I don't have as much control over this stuff as I thought I did. Maybe this whole surrender allow thing might actually work a little bit better for me than me fighting the current that is life. So yes, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Absolutely. And again, if you're on a physical journey that involves kidney disease, there's nobody that I know that I've met along my 25-year journey who's willfully asked for this.
Yes.
So
Yep.
it is almost like an initiation for us to start to develop that surrendering, that maybe something bigger is going on here, and that maybe this could pan out a multitude of ways, but it is going to bring up the fear. It is going to bring up the uncertainty. And you have two options in that case, is to resist it, which creates a lot more difficulty. And, you become frustrated and angry and guilty and ashamed. Like it makes things more complicated. Right? When we resist it, they always say, what you resist persists, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or you can tap into this other energy, which is usually you hit this when you've already fought a lot and you're tired. And you have to drop to your knees and say, okay, I know how to do this. I need some extracurricular help from above. So
Yeah, what I'm doing is not working. So, okay, maybe actually this is a bit more educated than I am. So I'm going to let this take over.
Could you imagine, right? Okay. So the next relationship we're going to talk about a little bit, which I think is one of the next utmost of importance as well, is the relationship that you have with yourself. So often we think that it is just our environment that's complicating our life. But a lot of times people in our environment are also triggering things within us that are our blind spots. So especially when you're on a healing journey, it is going to force you to be self-reflective. Otherwise, you can become very overwhelmed. And then again, that resistance comes in. Then you're blaming everybody because you're tired and frustrated and things aren't going right. And you're afraid and you're scared. So really cultivating the relationship with who I am and how do I participate in relationships is just as important as the people that are in your life.
100%.
Right? You could have like the most ideal partner in your life, but if you've got a lot of unresolved trauma or anger issues or a lot of fear that you can't communicate, you will destroy somebody who's actually really good for you. And then also, it can be the opposite. If you have a lot of unresolved trauma or have done little self-reflection in your life, sometimes you can, attract unhealthy people in your life, but because of maybe a desire to be codependent, or you're afraid to be left alone, or you are a people pleaser, then all of a sudden you're keeping a lot of people in your circle that actually need to go. So that's why I think it's really important to start to mature with this relationship of who am I?
Yeah, and it's totally agree with all of that. And I love this analogy of thinking about it this way, which is, the relationship with self. If you were sitting in a movie, watching your life on a movie screen, and when you watch the characters and you just want to scream out at them, like, can you not see the bleeding obvious? When you're watching some Netflix series or some movie, and I'm always very self-reflective. I do at least this sort of in my journal writing twice a week, that if I was watching the life that is my movie, what would I be screaming out from the seat? Like, can you not see this? What can you not get? I really like to play devil's advocate on myself like that twice a week, because I think in that, if you really zoom out and you really have a look at your life, you know what you need to change and what you need to do. But yeah, so I love that analogy. So I'm actually very actively practicing this in my life at the moment. Twice a week self-reflection. If I was watching the movie of my life, what would I be screaming at the screen for the person, the main character being myself, to change? So yeah, such an important relationship, isn't it?
Yeah, I love that you're doing that. It doesn't have to be complicated. It is
No.
like you're sitting in a movie. What would you be screaming to the main character that is you? And are you willing to take your own medicine and then actually follow through with some changes? That's probably the harder of the self-reflection, is to follow through. But again, self-awareness doesn't have to be really complicated or elusive. It's just, you just have to ask yourself some different questions. And then again, it's the processing and taking willful action with certain things that might be the more difficult next step.
Yes, so true.
So again, I take a little bit of a spiritual perspective because it eases my mind and my heart and my soul and reminds me how imperfect I am, right? So I have a little bit, I think we've talked about this before, is I have a little bit of the perfectionistic program running. I was a parentified child, really the people pleaser. So I have to be mindful of the programs that I've discovered within me and address them with compassion when they still come up, right? So I like to remind myself, we are a soul, but we have a mind and a body. The mind and the body aren't perfect, right? And that's what we're working with here. I like to also talk about how we're spiritual beings, we're having a human experience, right? So we're fallible, nobody's perfect. Lighten up a little bit on yourself as you're working on your self-development, but not being too hard on yourself. I like to also say that we're angels in training and we're on Earth School.
Yeah, I
which
love
gives
that one.
permission to realize, like, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Nobody has this figured out. You're going to get a lot of lessons. And yes, maybe on social media, some people present themselves as looking more put together or perfect. But the reality is we're all on this Earth School learning lessons. Maybe some of us are at different grades.
Yes.
But, right? So also having compassion to realize that, maybe you've graduated out of elementary school into junior high, but maybe somebody who's really triggering you is still in elementary school, but you got to remember that you were in elementary school not that long ago too.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's actually been such an amazing concept for me, to be gentler on myself. And I don't know if you're the same with your control and perfectionism. I think you and I are very similar, I think. But that I'm very hard on myself, like self-critic, like, Fiona, you should have known better. But this whole going, you know what? There is no destination I have to get to. Life is life. And the whole point of life is learning and evolving and growing. And when I apply that all the time, and everything is a growth opportunity to learn, then there are no mistakes. It's just whether I decide to take the lesson out of it and evolve and move forward, or do I have to go and repeat the lesson again, which I often have to do.
Exactly.
But not being so hard on myself around that. And that really does make this whole playground of life a little bit more fun, a little bit more, oh yes, okay, I'm going through this again. Okay, good. All right. I thought I got this. No, okay, good. All right. What did I not quite get last time that I need to apply this time? And it does make that growing transformation sort of thing. For me too, in my personality, I almost get addicted, the wrong way, but I get, when I can focus on the growth, then I become very growth mindset. So everything becomes a growth opportunity. And so then, it becomes more fun. So at least that's my experience. Maybe not everybody loves the growth thing, especially when you're going through challenging health stuff, but it's the only way that I can rewrite that to go, I haven't done anything wrong. Like you say, nobody with chronic kidney disease wants this. No one with MS and spinal cord want that either. But it's like, okay, this is just a learning opportunity for me. How do I get the most out of that so I can make this journey and whatever I've been given the most fun that it can be?
Exactly. I love that because again, the mindset of, the perfectionist, it can be, you can lean into things like workaholism and the perfectionism, and you can even lead into just where you don't have fun anymore. You're just trying to achieve a goal so hard that you forget to lighten up and to have some fun. So when you kind of approach life as, what is this teaching me? what can I learn here? I'm learning, I'm growing, and I'm allowed to have fun too. And I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. It just loosens up the grip a little bit. And I think everybody deserves to have lots of fun actually while we're here as well. So, and then
Yeah.
the last thing I just wrote here is that we are human. And I like to break this down. So, hue is light. So we're this
Yeah.
combination of matter and light. And we've already talked about many times how the traditional medical system tends to be more matter focused. They want to focus on the physical, but we have this emotional, mental, psychic, spiritual side that comes with us as well. And one of the reasons why I think, I love being here as a part of the Kidney Coach so much, because you allow me to do cool things like talk about relationship health around an illness experience. Nobody ever in my 20 years of my doctors said to me, like, you might need to be mindful about the relationships you're having, or like never really they don't have time. But also I'm just appreciative that we can talk about this, because if you are unhappy in your environment, it does impact your journey a lot. There's just
Oh,
no way around it.
100%. And, I think, and this is why I'm so glad we're doing this topic. I'm a big believer that, sure, yeah, we have to get the diet right and exercise and all of those sort of things. But if you're not
Yep.
looking at this side of this thing, this is just as important. We now know from people like Gabor Mate how trauma impacts that. And that does come down to the relationships and everything that you're just speaking to now, relationships with ourselves, our higher selves, God, spirituality, and the people around us. And if we aren't dissecting that stuff and looking at it and looking at who we spend time with and the people we surround ourselves with, we aren't completely healing it. It's not a holistic look at it. So your insights into this are just as important as all the other stuff that we harp on about a Kidney Coach and these conversations. And it's why you're such an invaluable part of the team and a part of the channel, is we have to have these conversations. And it's why you have navigated to transplants and dialysis and everything that comes with it so well. And probably part of your journey to bring this message is, the introspection, and because you did this and look how well you've come out of it on the other side. And it's because you did it holistically and you did all of this stuff and continue to do so. So I don't think healing is complete without these conversations.
Yeah, thank you so much for holding that space. I'm sure this is music to many people's ears that are listening to this, because when it's suppressed, repressed, not valued, you disconnect from the ability to see this as a growth experience, which just makes things much more difficult. It creates more stress in our lives. And even if you just want to look at it most reductionistically, which is when you do this kind of work, it can really impact your stress level in a positive way. And even
Yeah.
that is a huge win, because we know that chronic stress starts, you got the nervous system, then you've got the endocrine systems involved, then the immune systems involved, and that all is connected. So that's why we have to take time to really investigate, what story are you telling yourself? What movie are you in? And what kind of relationships are feeding into what you're telling yourself? So in my opinion, as yours, it's just invaluable as far as getting through an illness experience and seeing the potential of the healing that can occur. So the next thing is this higher self relationship, which we touched on briefly. So this develops often over time, where we connect with the witness consciousness. So this is the ability to watch our life, as we talked about, our movie and our experiences, kind of like a director, and we start to learn from our movie of life. You just brought this up about, really. In fact, I have a recurring dream. And dreams is kind of an interesting thing, because often our dreams can send information too, if you're able to remember them or write them down. So dream analysis is kind of a fun little thing to do. But I've had a recurring dream over my life where I'm literally walking into a movie theater. And sometimes it'll be crowded, sometimes it'll be more empty. And I'm walking in just like you were going into a movie, and I'm picking a seat and I'm watching a movie. And lo and behold, there's me up on the screen living parts of my life. And
Wow, that's That's a symbolic recurring dream right there.
It's an extremely, I must be a little slow because it had to be like very direct and so symbolic for me to get it. But it's funny because sometimes in my dreams, I can see myself watching the movie and I'm curious or I'm content watching what's going on. And then sometimes I sit down in my movie seat and I can tell that whatever I'm watching is like so disturbing that I want to get up and run out. So it's just so interesting how you can start to, use dreams or use these analogies to just take a little bit higher perspective view on your life. So it's kind of a relationship that develops usually if you're practicing some sort of meditation or yoga where you're learning to quiet down and you're learning that actually some things come through your mind when you slow your thoughts down. When your thoughts are just going on autopilot, it's hard for the higher self to get a word in edgewise because your story is just spinning so fast. So in order to start the development of this relationship, usually there's something that will slow you down, like you break a foot or an accident happens or you get sick that forces you to slow down, or a practice like meditation or yoga or something of the sort that encourages you to slow down and just be mindful of your thoughts. So when I started to develop this relationship many years ago when I was meditating and teaching yoga, once I learned to quiet the mind down enough, right? And the running excuse for people that would come in to take meditation class would usually come from the type A types of personality, which is my comfort zone, actually. But what they would say to me is, I don't really like the meditation. Like, it's not really my thing. It's too slow. And I would say, of course, I get it, but that's why you need it. Is to just take the time to slow down and appreciate the value and what you learn when you're slowing down. So the first thing that happened to me when I started to meditation's a practice. I don't know anybody that's good at it, especially when they start. And if you live somewhere in the Western society, nobody's good at it. So just so everybody knows that it is a practice.
Oh, and just to reiterate what you're saying, I mean, I worked with the meditation Dr. Joe for years and would spend 8 to 9 hours a day in meditation. And I can still tell you it's a practice. And there are days I fall asleep and other days I have amazing experiences. But that's not every day. Like, it's a practice. You have to practice. Like, yeah, absolutely. Please, anyone listening, you don't go into meditation and have these transcendental, amazing experiences. They may happen, they may not, but just the process of sitting with yourself and like you say, slowing down. It took me 2 to 3 years to even get to the point where I can now sit down and go straight into that spot. But like I said, I was traveling around with the foremost person that teaches this stuff and doing 8 to 9 hours every day. Like, yeah. So yes, for anyone just listening, I reiterate the fact of someone that has really been in the deep end of meditation. Yeah. It's not something you perfect overnight or ever, maybe.
Right. It's true, but it's still worth getting into and getting involved with it and just starting to become aware of the stories that are going on in your head. I remember at one point, several months into my meditation practice, where I had to have a laugh because I suddenly became aware of all of these simultaneous stories that were running through my mind's eye. And I'm thinking, geez, I'm like a soap opera up there, just like different stories are leading into different stories and thoughts. But that was the moment that I really realized there's something to this. There's really something to this. And then eventually what happened was when I could quiet the mind down enough, I would have these longer spaces between thoughts, whereas maybe in the beginning it was just a second and then the thought would come back, right? And then you're fighting with the thought saying you're not supposed to be thinking, you're not good at this, right? But once I started to slow down, I was getting longer spaces between the thoughts and just resting in the no thought mindset. I was like, okay, I'm safe. Like, nothing's happening. I remember at first when there was just blankness, no thoughts. And it's a little alarming a little bit. It's a little scary. But then I started to rest into that a little more. And then what I noticed was this started to happen was that I could rest my thoughts. I would get longer spaces between them. And then all of a sudden, something good would come in. something higher, something that was like trying to give me some deeper insight about something. And I was like, oh, wow, that's the kind of information that I would like more of, right? So just letting the frivolous day-to-day stuff, starting to let that go so I can create this space for more actual insight that can be very helpful for me. And that's when really, I believe for me, the relationship with my higher self, where this beautiful, wise insight would start to kind of download in those spaces when my mind just wasn't incessantly running on autopilot.
Yeah. And it's not until you start a meditation practice that you realize how, we call it the monkey mind, how noisy it is. And it's, I always think of that Morgan Freeman now narrating your life. And it's like when you slow down and you learn to become the observer, and that's part of a meditation practice, you learn to observe the thoughts. And it's like, wow, it's like a narration going on in there 24/7. And you're like, where do these thoughts even come from? They are so random and bizarre. And so, yes, when you slow down and allow a gap between the thoughts, you then tap into the, as Dr. Joe would call it, the nothingness, which is the quantum field, which is where greater information outside our limited way of thinking, because you can't outthink yourself. You think the way that you think. And so meditation, as if you're into that psychedelics, they are a way of thinking greater than your neural networks allow you on the default mode network. And I obviously prefer the practice of meditation, but it is a way to think greater than the limited thinking that we're all programmed to do, that we do day in, day out. We've just got a neural network highway of just thinking the same way. It's not until you can give yourself space and, exactly as you said, allow a greater thought to come in, of wherever that comes from, by tapping into the nothingness, that we allow expansion of our awareness and our experiences. So, and that is why meditation is so important. That is the environment you need to put yourself in to start thinking greater than you already are. I don't know anything that's better than meditation.
Right. I 100% concur. It's worth practicing it because, again, like you said, when you tap into that nothingness, there's thoughts, insights, energy, wisdom that doesn't have the muddiness of our traumatic lived experiences. And it is very brilliant. So anybody who's watching this, if they're questioning whether or not to start a meditation practice, getting in touch with this, I would absolutely recommend it. So
muddiness is a perfect word for it too, Stephanie. I couldn't use a better word for it. So yes.
Yeah. You know what? Sometimes I call it my stinky little pond. Is like sometimes like the pond just gets a little stinky and muddy, and you want to get more to that clear, that, polishing the lens, as they say. So, all right. So the next type of relationship, and more grounded, we went through the spiritual connection, we went through the self connection and the story you're telling yourself. Then we have these relationships with friends and family. And this is just kind of in our everyday three-dimensional experience. This is the family you grow up with, the friends that are around. Typically, hopefully, it can be a loving connection that often stays with you for a long period of time. And sometimes, like, you just know they'll be there throughout your entire journey. I even have the movie reference here. So I put down, these people tend to be a main character in your movie, in some way, shape, or form. They can be challenging relationships and offer growth, but often differently than some of the more powerful connections that we're going to talk about as we proceed through this. A lot of friends and family are there to provide this sense of love and support. Now, that being said, we can have more powerful connections with certain family members or certain friends who trigger much more than this kind of relationship. I know not everybody has had the ideal childhood, me including. There was a lot of core lessons for myself within my childhood experience, but this category I'm just sharing is like the generalized friends and family type of relationship. Oh, we get right into this one. So we're going to talk about the karmic connections here.
Great image, by the way. I love that.
Yeah, it's always fun trying to find these images. Yeah, so a karmic connection is, I'll just read what I have here to start. So people or circumstances that can show up sometimes suddenly out of the blue, and they're related often to our core karmic or life lessons. They're often powerful and painful teachers. They can be very intense, very energetic, very magnetic, They can come and go suddenly, and they can bring out the worst in you.
Mm.
Okay, so these types of, they're not just people, but they're people that bring about certain experiences and situations where you're going about life and all of a sudden you meet someone at the grocery store who wants to help you with a situation, and you find yourself almost like in a sudden vortex of energy with this person. It's like all of a sudden you're swept up in something. It can be a love relationship. This is a very common, a karmic relationship can be a love relationship that's very, very like the fire here, very hot, very intense, burns very hot, can be mistaken often as somebody who's like a soulmate, because there can be such a high intensity of chemistry that's very out of control when it starts, right? So the brain automatically assumes this is a very important person. This must be my soulmate because the chemistry is just burning up, right? But these people and these connections usually are triggering or mirroring something deeper within us that wants to come to the surface. Very often it's deep and it's hard to see. So there's a lot of blame and direction towards the person that got us caught up in this vortex that created something very stressful, typically when we get through this kind of a connection. So I don't know if you can relate with that at all, but can be a lover, can be a friend, can be a work partner.
Yeah, work partners, definitely romantic relationships. And I think this image, and I'm going back to the image because it's so brilliant, is, I mean, he's got the V for Vendetta mask on, which is one of my all-time favorite movies, which is very much symbolic of bucking the system and things like that. But then he's sitting reading a paper calmly on fire. And that is what these relationships are like. They're like this deep part of you goes, this is not good. Like, I'm compromising myself. I'm doing this, but the fire, they might, like you say, no, they must be this, they must be that. And what I found are these are very much the Phoenix transformation relationships. If you allow them, and often these relationships, for whatever reason, they do tend to burn you to the ground so you can reemerge. They tend to have that. Not many people get out of them halfway through. They have this, I'm going to burn you until you are a cinder, until you can come as that phoenix and reemerge. And I think in some ways it's surrendering to the craziness of the karmic stuff and being able to observe it, because if you let these relationships, they are so transforming and powerful. Because if you see, to your point, the deep, and I agree, these people are karmic connections that come in to help you transform something that you're not able to do without this person to help you do it. But if you allow yourself to go through the process and then have a good relationship with everything you've mentioned before, your higher self, your spiritual connection, whatever that looks like, and you can sit in the destruction of it, and often you have to sit in it and feel all the pain, from that comes the growth that's needed so you don't have to go and do another one of these. So, yeah, I think the image, I don't know if you sat and thought, like, I just look at that and I'm like, I couldn't have picked a better image, you know, because it is very much like I'm reading the news. My life is on fire. I know it's on fire. I know this person's bad for me. I haven't quite learnt what I need to do. So I'm going, and you often can't. There's a weird thing. So anyone listening, I don't want anyone to feel bad that sits in there, because there often is an inability, and I say this because I've been just through this myself not long ago. There's an inability, even though you know this relationship is bad, to leave it till it's burnt you to the crisp, because you need that Phoenix transformation moment. And if you leave those relationships, and again, this is my thing, too early before you get the lesson, you will repeat it somewhere else. So I had surrendered and decided I was going to do it all in one foul swoop and really get burnt. But I'm also very grateful for it, because I can now see all the areas of my life where I wasn't moving or growing, or I was stuck, but I had to burn to the ground to do it. So often very painful relationships, as you said, but they can be the most transformative if you allow yourself to sit in the cinders of the dust that often comes after them, and then you can transform into the phoenix. But yeah, and again, my point is, people that might be going through these, and all your friends and family might be saying you should just leave and you should know better. These, and I think, you know, typically, and I don't know what you think, we would refer to these as trauma bonds generally. You can't leave them. There is an inability to leave until you get the lesson. And people, I'm like for me, I'm like, I'm a very smart, intelligent woman. Like, why am I staying here? But it wasn't until I really got it. And once I got it, done. And it was amazing. It was like, okay, I can walk away and it's clean and I don't need to repeat that. But I'm glad I let myself burn to the ground with it, as painful as it was, because that is where the transformation was.
Yeah, that's so well said. And for anybody watching this, we've all been here. So, it needs to be handled with compassion, with curiosity, with questioning, because you're absolutely right. I mean, these things can pull you into situations that you've never dreamed of. You can get swept up in something, and next thing you know, you're sitting in jail, or something like crazy happened, and you're like, what the hell? What is going on? And again, the what's trying to be pulled out is so incredibly deep that you start to question your own, people start questioning you, what's wrong with you, you shouldn't be with that person. And like you said, don't feel bad or guilty if you're stuck in one of these at a particular time. Get curious. What is this teaching me? And sadly, we got to feel the pain. We got to feel that pain, because like you said, if you run prematurely, this is when we start to get the situation that arises where somebody says, why do I keep pulling in the same narcissistic type of person in my life? It's because there's something there that you're not quite connecting with, to be able to get you to disconnect or to realize what that person is trying to show you. So you're absolutely right. Very difficult. An amazing opportunity. And very often you don't want to go through something like that again. So it's a strange, like, in disguise, right? It's a blessing in disguise, but boy, are you going to feel it.
And that's the whole point. You need to sit and feel it, because that is where all the juju magic is. And it's often so painful, nobody wants to, but it's that suppressed emotion that's generally from earlier childhood trauma and inner child stuff, really. And that you've just not faced with yourself, that this person has mirrored back to you and has pulled out of you. Like, life is just a big fat mirror. And if you allow yourself to go and look in the mirror, feel it, as you mentioned, that's where the transformation happens. And then these people become, in retrospect, a great blessing. So you can bless them and let them go and go, don't do that again. Thanks. I've got the lessons with you.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. They tend to be almost always triggering some very deep core wound that's usually rooted in childhood. Things like abandonment and, just very core issues to try to propel you into something more healthy, to realize your experience and to realize how to forgive and move on and evolve. So these relationships, while you're on a healing journey, relationships are going to come into your life when they're meant to come into your life. But what we will say is this, that if you are really on a healing journey and focusing on yourself, you do want to be mindful if you have someone coming in that wants to blow up your life when you're at a time where you really need to say, you know what, I need to really focus on myself right now, because this will amplify my stress to the degree where I could put myself in a very seriously harmful situation. So again, being mindful of the types of relationships that you allow in when you're on a healing journey, I think is really important too. If you can avoid it. Sometimes you can't avoid it, and you're in a health crisis and the karmic comes along and it's just everything's going to burn down and challenge you. Sometimes that happens too, sadly.
Yeah. No, but it's a very good point. And I think, for me at least, I had to go through this to get to a point where now I'm very discriminatory about who does and doesn't come into my life, because I'm so focused on my health and my healing. But yes, but it's such a good point that if you are self-aware enough to go, do I want this when I should, or I not should, when I want to be focusing on myself and where my energy goes. And it's back to what we said, you become the people that you hang out with the most. Like, is this the energy that I want to become like? So yeah, it's a good point.
Exactly. You're not helpless in your choice of relationships. And I know I'm totally guilty. I've been swept off my feet in situations before where I just was sure that this person was going to be my soulmate forever. And in a very difficult time. So, But at some point, we have to realize that, you know, we do have choice with who we surround ourselves with. So
100%.
next type of relationship is a nice one, and these are called soulmates. So in my learning about different types of relationships, you can have soulmates that are friends too. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be a lover. It's just a very deep, like-minded connection, right? So deep, loving, respectful, a lot of likes and similar interests tend to be the type of soulmate relationships. They tend to be like similar things and be very compatible. Growth can occur over time for sure. It's not as hot and heavy as the karmic and that like 1-2 punch, you're down and now you're trying to bring yourself up like the phoenix. These types of growths tend to be a little more calm, not as crazy as the karmic connection. Soulmate relationships aren't always necessarily meant to be permanent, but they can be usually be longer lasting. They can be intense and magnetic and have urges to support and share life together. These would be considered what, you know, some people say, like if you use this in relation to an intimate partnership or a marriage or relationship, is, you know, these are the people who say, well, we're really good friends as well too. Like it's our friendship that sustains our lovership and our relationship. Again, can be in many forms: friends, lovers, family. These are healthy people to have in your life. They got your back. They got your back. And everybody needs somebody who we know has our back. So
yeah, 100%. Beautiful relationships.
Yeah, definitely. This is where we're going to start to talk about the soul tribe a little bit. So again, we might think, well, aren't my soulmates my soul tribe? Sure, they can be. But I want to bring a little bit of a unique twist to this idea of one's individual soul tribe in their life. You may or may not have experienced this, those who are watching. I think everybody has experienced it, and they know that there's just something different about the relationship. And this is how I perceive it. So the soul tribe relationships are unique and they're very powerful connections. There's a power for individuals to heal through soul tribe relationships. There's a lot of expansion that can happen in soul tribe relationships. A lot of times a soul tribe member will show up when you're in a transitory or like a transition space. All of a sudden somebody comes out of the blue and you're like, oh my gosh, like, oh, you're an angel. Like you're just what I need right now at this point in my life, right? They can have a sense of core frequency. So this is the thing that I love most about these types of relationships, and I have it down here, is that instead of the similarities and that type of friendship that soulmates tend to have, these people can look very different on the surface. They can have different jobs, different belief systems, different upbringings, differences galore, but there's some sort of core inner frequency that they just know, like, you're like my soul brother or you are my soul sister, even though there's so many differences in our relationship. So that's why there's such a like a propensity and an ability to learn and expand, because there's something deeper within these friendships or you know, intimate relationships or friendships, that it's kind of like, no matter what you're going through or how different you are than me, like I am a part of you, I'm a part of your tribe, and I'm always able to contain all of you, even in your differences, which is like very, very powerful.
Yeah, I love soul tribes. I didn't find mine till very late. Actually, I would say the Dr. Joe crew are very much my soul tribe. And then my current business partner and his wife, who I work with doing a lot of the biohacking, you know, it's just like you say, brother from another mother. And it's just such, they're people that you just recognize a part of yourself in there. Like you say, they feel like family. You know, I'm thinking of George and Alana at the moment, you know, and it's like, I can't even explain it. You know, it makes no sense. They're a good 10 years younger than me, but just so familiar. We have the same senses of humor. You know, we're all into the same sort of things, but very different. And, but, you know, these people you would just do anything for, and there's just this commonality or a shared vision. And the Dr. Joe crew were like that as well. You know, there's this shared vision, or where you're going or how you view the world. So there becomes this soul connection or container, which you sort of alluded to, where you can hold these people through everything. And like you say, they've got your back and they're all about growth. And there's, the core frequency. It's a really great way of doing it. And these people are so special. And, if you haven't found them, and like I say, I was much later in my life until I ever had that feeling of soul tribe. And it's such a lovely recognition. It's a different way of experiencing people, because it's like you recognize them. And I love that.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And like you, I didn't find my soul tribe until I started to really connect with my own soul. I think that it happens a little later in life for people, unless you're lucky, maybe you meet one. But when you start to have a couple, 3, 4, a little handful of your soul tribe around you, it's just such a great blessing in life, because like you said, there's a shared frequency. Usually it revolves around some sort of desire to expand. There's like a commitment and a devotion to growth, expansion, and offering something better into the world. So sometimes it's work related or like mission related. And again, it doesn't matter how different they are. And it doesn't even have to be somebody who's in your life a lot. Like this person could pop in and out every few months, or a year later, you see them and you're just like, oh, there you are. Like, just hits you, right in the heart. And it's like, oh, so happy to have you in my life. So these people also, if you get into a intimate relationship with somebody from your soul tribe, it's a little different than the soulmate relationship, where the soulmate relationship is more supportive, and I've got your back and I'm always defending you no matter what. And, I got you. Whereas I've heard it posed so gracefully through a spiritual teacher named, his name's Gary Zukav, and his wife named Linda. And, beautiful teachers, and they describe a spiritual or soul tribe relationship by saying this: they're never afraid to tell the other person honestly the thing that they fear may destroy their relationship. Because they know, these couples or pairs know, they've done enough work on themselves to understand that if they're committed to each other, that they understand no matter what, they want the truth. The truth is very important, and that they have faith and trust in their ability to repair, because the love is unconditional and deep and real. So whereas most marriages, you're not going to hear many people say, well, I'm never afraid to tell my husband the thing that's going to destroy the relationship. Usually we're a little more mindful of what we say in soulmate type relationships, because we want to have the other person's back, like a friend. Soul tribe members, expansion is number one. The love is unconditional, but the relationship revolves around the continuation of the expansion of the soul, which means that sometimes they will call you out on the things that you don't see, because both of them understand this may hurt, but underneath that hurt, I know you're doing this because actually it's love. You're willing to show me something because you love me. Yeah.
No, it's a very good distinction. And Gary Zerka, he wrote The Dancing Relay Masters, which is one of the first ever spiritual books I had to read as part of a course I did. So if you want to understand quantum physics described in how to integrate it in day-to-day life, that is a great book. It's a little bit of a brain twister and takes a little bit of concentration, but it's a great book, and he's an amazing teacher. So yeah, it's what you said there is very true. And they are, for me, really pinnacle relationships where someone loves you enough to tell you the truth.
Exactly. So, when you go through a healing journey such as kidney, you're facing kidney disease, there's everything's on the table for the most part when you go through a very serious illness, or you're told that you have kidney disease. It becomes very vulnerable and raw unless you're in avoidance. It can become something where stuff starts to arise, and within the psyche, within the emotions, and it also can break people's hearts open. to things that they've ignored, suppressed, repressed, or haven't yet faced in their life. I mean, when somebody's diagnosed with a condition, your own mortality all of a sudden becomes something that you're thinking about more. Or again, you don't have control. So your thoughts start going into these different directions. But for me, I've always tried to see my illness as me having a relationship with my illness as well, right? So what kind of relationship am I having with this diagnosis? How can I make it more compassionate? How can I, in fact, ask it what it's here to teach me? And it's one of those things. Go ahead, Fiona.
No, I was just going to say the curiosity part about it rather than the trying to almost die. I think what a lot of us do when we have a disease is we try to dissect it from ourselves or remove ourselves from it or separate ourselves from it or put gaps in it. And what you're talking about is having an open, curious relationship with it, where you're not trying to push it away. And it's very much comes down to that IFS. I don't know if you've done a lot of parts work and things like that, but it's almost like rather than disassociating with a disease, you bring it into the inner circle. Or if we look at this IFS, integrated family system part work, and we say, what is this part or disease trying to teach me? And the curiosity and the caring, and we treat it like you're saying, a relationship with someone. Because I think what you're going to with this and what I am hearing is almost your disease is a bit like this soul tribe, isn't it? It is that, it's the part that loves you unconditionally that's going to tell you the truth in the most brutal way in a disease and illness. If we create the space for it, it can be, and I'd love to hear your experience of this, but, for me having multiple sclerosis and a spinal cord injury, when I have stopped dissecting it and removing it and pushing it away and brought it in closer, like an inner part or a part of me that needs to be understood and be given compassion, there is no longer a, what's the word I'm looking for, a anger or a resentment that you only hold against yourself, right? There is now this compassion, understanding, and for me, definitely a surrender in there are lessons in this I couldn't get any other way, and that there is beauty in the diagnosis and the disease. And instead of pushing it away, it doesn't mean that I give up and not do all the other things that I know that might help me heal, but at least I've made space for it within myself that isn't so violent.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And that's exactly the process that I went on. Initially, I was diagnosed in my early 20s. So of course, there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of fear and misunderstanding and the unknown, really facing. It's like I was on my own hero's journey going into the abyss, but I didn't yet really have that understanding that all of these wonderful stories existed and myths existed about the very thing that I was experiencing, right? So in hindsight, I can look back and say, of course, that was my initiation. That was part of my hero's journey to really uncover more so and realize myself on a much deeper, more profound level. But when you're in it, all you want to do is get rid of it.
100%.
Because it's fearful and you're trying to do everything you can. And, I speak with a lot of, friends and along this journey, and, they'll say, well, what can you tell me to do to get rid of it? Like, how do I get rid of this? What do I do? And I've totally been there. And of course, there may be something that, part of the journey may be that you can just completely reverse it and there's nothing else that you have to work with anymore. And that would be a great blessing. For the majority of us, there may be an underlying condition that goes along with the kidney disease. And maybe you, like I, have gotten the label that it's chronic. So it's something that I don't want to spiritually bypass and pretend doesn't exist. So I have to kind of look at it paradoxically, where I understand the reality of being a body and having a, being in matter and having a body and things go wrong. That's real. That's real. I have to appreciate the reality of that while still allowing myself to stay connected to the higher self and the broader perspective of what is this teaching me? What can I do to sustain myself with this as long and as healthily as I can? So it really requires a maturity to start to settle in within the psyche of the individual, to be able to see this as a paradox that, yes, this sucks, but also there's something really profound, this gold that's going to be birthed out of this process as well, too. So the relationship you have with this experience needs to be embraced, like you said, with parts work. You can't cut it off. It's going to complicate things. And it's really coming from a very innocent fear to want to cut and get rid of it. And that's normal. That's part of the human experience. But as we mature, it's how do I take the things I'm afraid of in life and even a diagnosis and make it a compassionate part of my life that showed up? And how do I treat it as a healthy member of my own inner family, and just do the best I can and understand that sometimes I'm going to have bad days and sometimes it's going to be better. But the more I reject, suppress, try to cut off this part of me, the more I'm going to suffer. And is that what I really want?
Yeah, 100%. I think I couldn't have said that better myself. And it's a tough one. And I think we're also socially conditioned to the fact that dis-ease and diagnosis is bad and there's something wrong with us and we've failed and our body's failing us. And I think that narrative is something that sits with most of us. And it has been the hardest and biggest thing for me. I mean, like you, coming from a medical background and being a naturopath, that when there's a disease in the body, especially as a naturopath who's eaten organic their whole life and exercised, has been fit and doesn't have any of the precursors that should have given me a chronic disease, it's like, why did this happen to me? And I did spend a lot of woe is me and why is me. But I think part of that comes from the narrative around dis-ease being such a thing. We don't have a narrative that dis-ease and diagnosis and chronic disease can be just part of the human experience and how we grow and get lessons that we wouldn't get otherwise. And that's whether it's karmic, whatever you believe in with that. You know, I have to believe there's something bigger, because as you mentioned right at the beginning of this podcast, we don't sit down and go, I want chronic kidney disease. Like bring that on. Let me have that as an experience. None of us are saying that, but maybe on a deeper soul level, we're saying, how do I become the best version of myself? How do I become more compassionate to myself and others? You know, for me, how do I become a better practitioner, understand what people are going through? Well, I know, if you're chronic disease, and those lessons maybe are something that my soul called out for, and I couldn't have got it any other way. And so I think when I've rewritten the narrative and gone, you know, it's society that says dis-ease is a bad thing, but it's always going to exist. Someone's going to have to experience it. And in this lifetime, and my experience is going to be that. So how do I make this journey with that as part of what I'm going to experience still fun and amazing and joyful and still living, without me being violent to myself all the time by having these really negative things, trying to cut a part of intrinsically who I am out. And it's taken me a very long time to get to that point. I've probably only just gotten there in the last sort of 12 months, but there comes the word coming to my mind is there comes a joyfulness and a playfulness in having a dis-ease. And sure, you sit in chronic pain and I can't move properly and things like that. But when I'm not sitting in that and I'm sitting in the growth factor and the connection factor and all the other stuff, there is nothing but gratitude. And that proper surrender that Michael Singer would say, where I'm like, I don't want my life to be any other way. And I think, you know, that's a lifetime work for any of us to get to. But when you can get to that, you stop being in violation of yourself. And it's not something don't anyone think that I'm enlightened and I sit there all the time. I don't, but I definitely have these bigger moments of where I can sit and feel nothing but gratitude towards myself and the disease and the way it manifests. And when you can get there, life isn't as bad.
Absolutely. It is a process. It's a journey. That's what life is. Right. And I agree with you, is that the narrative of disease is bad and we will conquer this and we got to fight. It's a war. I understand that that's the typical training of Western healthcare. And there's something I value in them trying to help get this gone, so to speak. But 100%. What we need more than ever, and why I'm so happy to be here, is that there is something very spiritual and very much beyond that narrative that can help us impart incredible grace and positivity and evolution and connection rather than disconnection. When somebody is told your body is doing something bad, that puts a lot of extra weight on, especially somebody similar to you and I, who was actually almost doing everything right prior to the condition. So then you start to really beat yourself up thinking, well, I was already doing everything right. Like, what am I doing wrong now? And that's almost a trigger to my core wounds of perfectionism and codependence and people pleasing. So then it puts me on this mental, emotional, psychic spiral that once again, I am really screwed up and not worthy. And that's very, very detrimental. So I'm so thankful that these spaces exist. When we got the doctors fighting the disease, but also, again, the goal is for this spiritual perspective and the physical perspective to somehow be in a good relationship together. But until then, we have these spaces where we can lighten the story around dis-ease and look at it as a relationship that showed up for our growth and evolution that we can have an actual good relationship with. And I think that's the best thing that we could do, the highest possibility within this space. So thank you.
It's definitely the kindest thing that we can do to ourselves. That's for sure. So Stephanie, I always love these conversations with you. I think, as I said right at the beginning, the reason you're such an invaluable part of the Kidney Coach team and part of the YouTube channel and why we keep doing these regular podcasts is we have to have these conversations. I really want people to cultivate compassion towards themselves when they're going through chronic disease, because everything that you just said then, you and I have been through. We know the conflict that happens when you start to beat yourself up and all the normal things that come through when you're diagnosed with a chronic disease of why me, what did I do wrong, am I being punished? All of that, and that thinking isn't helpful long term. So it's like, how do we support people to have a different narrative towards themselves and cultivate self-compassion, because it's that cultivation that will set up the environment for healing. And again, healing, what I've come to realize with myself, doesn't necessarily mean the removal of the disease. Healing happens deeper on a soul level, and when you get there, you can surrender to the outcome of the disease. It just becomes part of your life experience without it being something that you need to cut off and remove from. And that's a very rewarding place to get. But, it's a lifetime of things that you and I have to practice every time. And it's probably why we have these conversations, because you often have the conversations you need to remember the most yourself. So
exactly. And to bring it full circle about the relationships is that when we change the narrative about learning and growth, even in difficult situations, that is when we start to connect with our soul, reconnect with the soul amongst our processes, whether it's whatever you're going through. You stay connected to the soul, then you start to attract that soul tribe, and life becomes even more meaningful when you start to let the stuff come up that's hurtful, let the fear come up, talk about it, get the right people around you, start to process some of this stuff in a healthy way. So you're more connected, and then you're attracting the right people, which just makes life even that much more beautiful and meaningful. So
yeah, no, 100%. I love it. Well, hopefully everyone found this podcast super useful, and just about how you cultivate the relationship with yourself and with the people who you choose to come on the journey with you. And to know that I think as beings, we do have choice around that, and the people that we choose and the relationship we decide to have with ourselves and our dis-ease is just as important as the food you eat, exercise, sunlight, all of those sort of things. And I hope there's some food for thought for people to go away and think about that. If you want to know more about what Stephanie does, I'll put in her details below. You can also connect with her straight through our Kidney Coach. She does one-on-one coaching for anyone that wants help with this aspect of disease and diagnosis. She's our coach for that. So I'll put in the link. You can book in a consult with her. These conversations are super transformative when it comes to healing any chronic disease, whether it be kidney disease or anything else like that. Stephanie, I don't know if you mind me sharing, but Stephanie's story is lupus, which is autoimmune that happened to lead to kidney stuff. So Stephanie's also very well versed in any of the, the autoimmune chronic diseases, full stop, and that relationship. You don't have to just be in kidney disease to really benefit from spending some time with this amazing goddess that's in front of me. So I'll put in all the details below. If you want to know more about what we do, head to www.kidneycoach.com. You'll find us on social media under all the same handles on Instagram and Facebook. And make sure you hit subscribe and like. That way you'll get notified anytime we put up more content. If there's any topics that you would like Stephanie to cover, please put them in the comments below and we will be sure to talk about them next time. And Stephanie will be back on the channel. And Stephanie, thank you as always for such an enlightening, high level conversation, which is what I like. High vibrational conversation. I think that's fabulous. It's a great way to start my day and hopefully end your day.
Awesome. Thank you so much. These conversations are what I live for. So thank you so much for giving me that space. And thanks for watching, everyone.
Yeah. See you all later. Thanks for being part of our tribe. Bye.